international orientation online. It'll be during the week of your quarantine, during the August 3rd, that week of August 3rd, we'll be doing an online orientation then for you.
Yeah, and the same is true for LLM students at the College of Law. It'll be online beginning the week of August 3rd, and then the JD orientation will begin the week of August 8th.
Perfect. And I think we've addressed this question before, but it keeps coming back up. So if an international student can't get to the US by the beginning of the course of the semester because of travel restrictions, could they attend classes virtually until they arrive at Stetson?
Yes, and I can also mention, I saw that Haley asked a question about hybrid learning in general, so I'll just kind of put all those together and talk about it. So at this point, we've made a significant amount of changes to how we're going to have to run classes on campus. For most of the classrooms, we've had to change the cap of the amount of people who can be in that classroom space so that people can spread out, so that we can have appropriate social distancing. What that means for many of the classes is that they will be in a hybrid environment. So for example, if you're in a class that meets on Tuesday and Thursday, one half of the people might come in person on Tuesday while the other half is online, and that might switch on Thursday. That's just an example, because we don't have a lot of very large classrooms. And I'm just speaking for DeLand right now. College of Law can share secondly, because I know some things are similar and some things are different. But in DeLand, we don't have a lot of very large classrooms, because that's not kind of the education we give, to where we could spread everything out and keep the classes together. So there are a lot of faculty who are working on groups for that. There's also cleaning of each classroom in between. So we have to do a little bit of an adjustment to the class schedule to make sure that facilities has the time to come in and clean. So at this point, if you are not able to get here by the time that Focus or International Orientation or classes begin, then we would work with you to get as much of your course content online as possible and to keep you up to date. Many faculty, I've already had the discussion with them about international students and their need for this type of flexibility. So there shouldn't be a problem. We should be able to work with you on that. As far as students just preferring to stay home and not take classes online, at this point, we are encouraging as many people to come to campus as possible. I understand the case count in Florida. It's something that right now the VPs meet every Tuesday and every Friday. So we start by looking at the count and talking about it. So I don't know if that'll change over time, but for right now, we're encouraging as many people to show up face-to-face as possible. But if there is a reason why, you're needed to take some of it hybrid or organized in some way, most students, even on campus, will be doing some type of hybrid situation, because we also have some faculty who are in high-risk groups who won't be able to teach in person. So that's all things that are in process.
Roxanne, is there anything else you want to add from the visa perspective? And
yeah, there is. When a student is wanting to take a hybrid course or a strictly online class, there are lots of restrictions around that. Some of those restrictions had recently been lifted so that we could make it through the spring semester and keep your SEVIS records active and in good standing. They have not yet extended those restrictions and those accommodations into the fall. So right now, as of today, sitting in this meeting, we are operating as though the fall will be under the normal rules for all SEVIS visa holding students. And so we are kind of working with that set of rules as our primary set of rules for advising students who are trying to come back. Within that set of rules, you cannot take an online class, and you cannot do a hybrid class. You can only do those if you're in 3 full-time classes to go with it. If an accommodation comes down, then we of course will share that and make sure that everybody knows that, so that you have the opportunity to get into whatever classes are best going to work for you. If it does not come down, as Lua had said, the school is willing to make whatever accommodation they can to keep you active in your class, and we could work with you on a short-term basis to do that. But you have to hear that. This is not something that will get you through the whole semester. It is a short-term basis, as though you were out sick for a short while. You will be accommodated very much like it would be if you were missing classes because you had a bad case of the flu, as opposed to couldn't come back to the country. At some point, if we are not allowed to do that and to continue into the fall with these accommodations to the rules, at some point, we would have to talk about what are we going to do. You could not continue to do that through the whole semester.
One thing I would add is if you had to do all online classes, there are some things we could do that are kind of going around the system a little bit, which would be if you are a new student, we would then tell you not to get a visa until the spring. We would defer your visa to the spring, and because you don't actually need a visa to take online classes from your home country. So if you are a new student and you need to take everything all online and we're able to accommodate you in that way, then just don't get your visa till the spring, essentially, and you're fine. If you're a returning student, it gets a little more complicated because we'd essentially have to end your visa and you'd have to reapply for a new visa in the spring, which means you're paying the SEVIS fee again. You're having to go through that whole process again to get a new visa to come back in the spring. So for returning students, it's a lot harder than for the new students who might just want to defer their visa for a semester.
Wonderful. Thank you all for that. The next question pertains to finances. There's two questions within this. I'm going to join them both together. So will international students see any reduction in cost of attendance if they can't join campus and have to do virtual classes? And the second part, I'll add the second part. Do they have to pay the bill even if they won't be able to come to the USA in the fall?
So as far as the first question, at this point, there is no tuition difference between, we actually aren't at this point offering all online classes. And to Roxanne's point, which I think can't be overstated, it's my understanding, professionals in the room can correct me if you're wrong, that if you're an international student and you need to start that way, we understand, but that you cannot remain that way the entire semester. So although obviously you won't have to pay for meals, housing, etc., we don't have an all online option for the semester, actually. This is something that we would do with students who need it to accommodate them as much as possible. But at this point, there is no cost difference. And I would assume if it's the same with every other student, for any term that you're not here, that you take a pause or you're not a student, then you don't have to pay tuition for that term.
Thank you.
Let me just briefly add, I think the students need to consider, everything Lewis said is absolutely correct. But we hear a lot of chatter here at the law school about the prospect of starting online or taking up one or more courses online, but not wanting to have to pay the bill if they're not able to do it live. And I think the students need to consider, the prospect of doing it remotely, getting the credits, using the credits toward their degree. If you're doing all of that, we don't have free credits available, so to speak. So you have to look at both sides of the coin when you're considering that.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, the next question from the chat was, is it possible to get tested for COVID-19 instead of quarantining for 2 weeks? And I know Paula had made a response in the chat, but I wanted to share it just in case others weren't following along.
So right now we're following the CDC guidelines, which says that it has to be quarantined. And so we can't accept a test in place of the quarantine, unfortunately, not right now.
The next question is, when needing to change the visa status from a B visitor's visa to an F student while stuck in the US due to lockdown, would there be any support from Stetson, or do they need to go through their own personal attorney?
So, Roxanne,
Go ahead.
I'm going to defer to Roxanne. We were discussing this briefly in my office this morning, but I think Roxanne is the expert.
I wouldn't know about that. You can always get support from Stetson. Okay, so If you are in the process of trying to do a visa switch and you need a letter from us to support that, or if you need some proof that you've been in good standing in your CVIS record or anything, reach out to the people in your international office, and they will provide you whatever supports they can. But as for doing the application itself and then monitoring that application and such, that's between you and whichever legal advisor you are choosing to use.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, and I'm not sure who asked this question, it may be one of our incoming law students, is I would recommend you work with an immigration lawyer to try to get all of this stuff settled, or an outside advisor. But if you need support from Stetson, as Roxanne said, we'll of course support you. My understanding is it may be possible to begin your studies while you're in that transitioning process. I think Roxanne knows that better than I do. If that's the case, then talk with the folks in your international office and see if that's available in your unique situation. But of course, we want to help our students as much as we can, but we also want to ensure that you are maintaining status to protect your own rights and possibilities going forward.
And I think I heard it correctly that you would switch from a B as in boy to an F as in Frank. And if that's correct, yes, Wendy. The B being a tourist visa, you are allowed to take classes that are incidental, meaning you can pick up a class here and a class there that is of interest to you. You cannot enroll in a degree program while on a B visa. But you could begin sort of working on your long-term goal without declaring anything while still waiting for that transition to go across. But you cannot attend full-time classes.
Perfect. Thank you. Another question probably for Roxanne. Do you have any information from embassies on when the visa services will be coming back?
Yeah, I saw that one in the chat. Currently, there's no information on when the embassies will be reopening. There's actually news that's leaning in the opposite direction. There's a possibility that USCIS will be furloughing or laying off about 2/3 of their workforce as of August. And that is if things do not change very drastically very soon. If that should happen, that's going to prolong those shutdowns as opposed to turning them around, because they just would not have the workforce to be able to spin it back up. So at this point, they are not open. We're not expecting them to reopen anytime really soon, and it's possible that it may be for quite some while.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, if I can't be on campus before August 10th, will I do focus and international orientation online along with my classes while I quarantine?
Yes.
Right. The answer
Quick and to the point.
Yeah. For the international orientation, it's required by law, so we will get it to you.
And we will figure out what we need to for orientation. We're probably going to have a small group that's a completely online group. And then your courses, yes. So all of that would happen while you're in quarantine.
Perfect. If a returning student is currently in the EU and is not able to return, is it possible for this student to start taking classes online and then return as soon as it's possible without losing the visa? You're muted, Roxanne.
Maybe? Okay. So that's another one that's a little iffy. If that is something that you're facing as an individual, please email me. Let's talk this through, because possibly, but again, it's going to depend on how long you would need to be online. You know, you can't get through half the semester online and us be able to justify that. I've got to be able to justify that I am accommodating you for a short time until you can get here. So we need to talk over your individual situation. Please reach out to me, rlewis1@stetson.edu.
I wanted to clarify something here for students in general, and it speaks to a number of the questions that are being asked. something that Roxanne mentioned a little earlier is that the USCIS, who is responsible for issuing and facilitating the whole visa process, is experiencing significant fiscal issues that are tied to the fact that what their resources come from are fees from students like you, and from visa applications and so on, and immigration stuff from people like me, right? So I was an F1 student. I went through the whole process. I was also an H-1B student, and then I got married to an American citizen, and the rest is history. So throughout that process, I've probably spent something like $4,000 US, becoming a citizen of the United States. With travel restrictions, with shelter in place, with government shutdowns, with embassies not having resources available because of different mandates from different governments across the country, there is no money available after a certain period of time to pay people. And so it's a catch-22, right? So the US is not creating a punishing situation. The situation is creating a punishing situation for all the countries. And so the catch-22 there is resources are not available because people are not traveling, and because people are not traveling, people are not traveling, so the resources and application fees are not there. And because the application fees are not there, we can't process the application. So it's this really vicious cycle. And so we're hoping that what will happen is that Congress will either offer a bailout, or there's discussion that's going on right now around what might possibly happen. This is part of what's taking up a lot of the ether, a lot of the time of the USCIS, in that they are so focused on trying to preserve the standing of their employees that they really are not able to spend the kind of time that they probably want to spend trying to get the systems back up in place that are necessary. And then on top of that, you have a pandemic where people are looking at keeping borders as restricted as possible. So if you think about it from that perspective, it helps explain a little bit of why we're in the situation that we're in. The US is losing a lot of money by not having migration and immigration take place.
Thank you, Rosalie. And then the next question is about quarantining. Are they able to do so on campus? And if so, how will they eat?
You can do it on campus. You just have to let us know that you need that. And we deliver food from the Commons to your door. Front door service.
And at the College of Law, for international students, you can quarantine on campus if you're living on campus and already have told us that you wish to live on campus. For those that live off campus and on campus, we are trying to make food arrangements for those individuals, knowing that they probably haven't had time to shop and get the necessary supplies as they move in. So we will try to coordinate that individually with Jessica and her office to make sure that those people are taken care of.
Perfect, thank you. The next question is, if a student decides to defer for the spring, will they be affected due to the government administration's latest restrictions on visa and international workers?
Repeat that one for me.
We might need some clarification.
Okay.
For this private one, so if this was your question, feel free to elaborate a little bit more privately to me, that's fine. But this is the question. If students decided to defer for the spring, or to the spring it should be, will they be affected due to this administration's latest restrictions on visas and international workers?
I can try that one. So if you're coming on an F1 visa, that's not actually under the latest restrictions. It is impacting J's, but not the J students. So it would impact J interns, so student interns. It also impacts our J scholars, and different, because the J visa has several categories. We really only bring in exchange students on the J visa. Most of our degree seeking students are coming in on F visas, and that is not part of this latest kind of restrictions that were just implemented last week. I mean, things could change, but really that was about trying to preserve American jobs. That was their justification for it. And F1 students are students, so it's not a work visa. At this time, OPT is preserved. We don't know. That's something that could potentially go away. But right now it's still here. And the F visa should still be okay for now. Anything can change. Everything changes, but right now you're okay.
Perfect. That did answer the question, so thank you. The next question in the chat is, I got a meal plan exemption due to religious reasons. So can I order food to be delivered to my room where I quarantine?
You can.
Oh, you did respond already, but go ahead.
Yeah, you can. And if that becomes an issue also, we're happy to learn a little bit more about your dietary needs and see if we can deliver food either for free or at a very low cost from the Commons anyway. It just depends on the level of your dietary restriction. As you know, some of the religious accommodations we've been able to make in the cafeteria and some we just have not because of the way that food needs to be prepared, etc. So we're happy to help in any way. And then obviously you can get food delivered as well. Yes.
Perfect. That was the absolute last question so far. If you have any other questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. We'll be happy to answer them, or you can unmute and ask the question live if you'd like. Well, we do have one more that just came in. Would people coming from EU be allowed to get the visa in a third country, Mexico, for example, if the embassy there is open? And would we be allowed to go to Mexico, to go from Mexico to the US? So can you get your visa in Mexico if you're from the EU? And then can you fly from Mexico to the US instead of straight from the EU?
Unless Paula knows something that I don't, and she knows a lot of stuff I don't, but unless she knows something I do not, you would not be able to get a visa in Mexico. You would need to be a citizen of Mexico as well in order to get a visa from them. So I do not believe that would be possible. Coming in from Mexico with a visa from the EU or some other country, that would more than likely be possible. We don't have a problem with people coming across from Mexico at this point, as long as they're doing so legally.
As long as you spend at least 14 days in Mexico before coming to the US. That's the other key thing. You can't have been in any of those restricted countries in the past 14 days. But otherwise, I agree. I don't think you're going to be able to get a visa in Mexico if you're not either a Mexican citizen or permanent resident.
Well, thank you. If I can't come to the US in the fall, will my I-20 still be valid for the spring?
Yes, as long as you talk to me beforehand, right? So, or as long as you reach out to Vilaine if you are a law school student. We need to make notation on your CVIS record, which would allow you to essentially take that leave of absence semester, and it sets you up so that you're not expected to return until the spring, and you remain in good standing during that time.
Perfect. The next question is, I am half Lebanese, half Finnish, so I couldn't get a visa from Lebanon and then fly from there to the US, correct?
I don't know if the embassy in Lebanon would issue a visa. If they would, we would have no problems with that. It depends where you can get a visa. The challenge will be literally your flight routing, how you get here. Lebanon usually requires a stopover in Europe, and that may be problematic, and then in entering the United States because of the current travel ban. So there's lots of different logistics to work through. I don't think Stetson per se has any problems with that. It's a matter of what the federal travel bans are and what the embassies are willing to do for you while you're seeking out that visa.
Iceland might be an option. It's actually not on that list, and they have very few cases, so it may be a way that Lebanon could send some people to us.
Okay, the next question, if I can't get a visa before July 24th, will my classes be online until I can get everything in order?
If you're looking at the 24th, that means you are a brand new incoming international student, or you are somebody who has to do the extra extended quarantine. So you will not be able to take all of your classes online, but you would be able to start them online if you need to. However, if you're coming in on the 24th, then we're going to give you your orientation during that time. You're going to go through focus, and there's still a month and some odd days before we get there. So it's very possible that some of this may have shaken out and is much more clear by the time we get there. You cannot, I'm going to say this again, do not count on taking online classes at Stetson this fall. All right, currently we are not offering online classes, and your staying home does not make it an online class. You have got to come to the school this semester if you plan to be a student in this semester. Otherwise, you should be looking at taking a leave of absence.
Thank you. The next question is, how confident is Stetson about actually making it through the semester given the COVID situation in Florida right now?
Well, isn't that a question? I don't know. I mean, I'll be honest, like that, I'm just transparent with our students. We love you. I think a lot of it depends on all of our behavior, to be very honest with you, which is one reason why I say I don't know. If what they have found is in communities, even as large as other countries and as small communities, that if people have followed the guidelines regarding social distancing, masks, it's all of those things together. I've learned a lot about epidemiology that I didn't know. I don't study medicine at all, but I've learned a lot recently that really what matters is when you take all of those, what they call mitigation or kind of like trying to prevent infection and put them together, that's where you have the biggest impact. So when people are washing hands, wearing masks, staying away from each other, not going out downtown, not gathering in social parties on or off campus, that's where we actually can stay fairly safe. Will we have cases? Probably. We did in the spring. We have over the summer. Students are not here, but most of them. We haven't had one on campus with students who are on campus, but so it depends. Like I said, the President's Cabinet is constantly assessing how safe we feel it is to stay open. So my biggest concern is people coming back and just being so excited to see each other or to meet new people and gathering in large groups and feeling like they want to, be cool and don't want to wear a face mask in this space or whatever. And that's where, as we've seen, Florida, for example, if you haven't watched, recently reclosed bars. They're finding that a lot of the cases are from bars or from gyms, from indoor locations, because Florida's hot right now. So from indoor locations where people are hanging out close to each other without masks on. So I feel really good about all of the things that we've put in place. Like I mentioned, from the classroom cleaning to the res hall cleaning, we've put UV lights in the vents where we didn't have them. We've bought electrostatic cleaners. However, if a large group of people get together or people don't wear masks, we will have more cases. And at some point, if we have cases enough where we feel that it's unsafe to go to campus, then we'll switch completely to online. So I wish I had a number. I wish I had a confidence level. As you can tell, the situation shifts from under our feet every single week. So I don't even know what cases will be like in Florida in a month when many of you arrive. I would hope that they would be lower, that a lot of us would switch our behavioral pattern, but I don't know for sure. So at any point, if we do feel like it's just less safe. Now, we did a survey of a lot of returning and new students. Some of you might have received it. We didn't survey anyone. But what we found is that still almost many of our returning and new students still, even given the medical situation, want to be in person. So we're gonna try to do that for you. as long as we possibly can without interruption. So I'm hopeful.
Thank you, Lua. And the next question is, can I get into my residence hall July 24th? He's from Canada.
Are you a new student? Oh,
Yeah, no, go ahead, Paula, because you know better than I do. You've been
no,
working.
I'm just wondering if are you a new student? Because if you're a new student, then yes, you would be able to come in on the 24th and quarantine for those 2 weeks on campus, so that you have time to quarantine before focus starts. But if you're not a new student, you wouldn't be able to move in that early.
He's an athlete.
He's an athlete.
Well, unless your athletic team has set it up so that you could, because some of the athletes are coming back a little bit earlier than other students. So if your coach has made arrangements for your team to come back on the 24th, you'd be able to do that following his rules. So, but if you are a brand new student, that is the date that we're expecting you.
Thank you. There was a question in the chat on whether or not Stetson is considering online classes for the entire semester at all. Lua did respond saying that at this point they are planning to open predominantly face-to-face. So if there's any other questions related to that, feel free and let us know. I think Damien, I'm sorry, I don't want to say your name incorrectly. They're wondering if—
It's Damini.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Do you feel that this decision is a very risky one I'm assuming this is related to opening predominantly face-to-face?
Well, I think that it's a balance. Would I say that it's without risk? Absolutely not. If I felt that it was to the point that it was severely endangering people, we wouldn't go that route. And I'm one member of the cabinet, but listening to the majority of student input and people still preferring to be here. Now, like I said, we meet every Tuesday and Friday. Every Tuesday and Friday, we start the meeting by, is this still the path that we feel makes the most sense for us to be taking right now with all the information that we have in front of us, and we make the best decision for that day. So it does have some risk for sure, but I do feel that with all the mitigations, if people do follow them and put them into place, that we have a lot of ability to stay very safe. If not, then I would be at the cabinet right now, really fighting for us to be online. So that's where I am, today. And that's also with taking into account student input. We are aware that there is a group of students who have started kind of a online asking for us to go online. And I've also received a lot of emails from individual students saying, please, please don't do that. I'm a chemistry student. I want to be there in the lab. I want to be with my faculty member. I want to be with my instrument. I want to be with, so there's a lot of differing opinions on this for sure. Do I think it's completely without risk? Of course not. I think we're constantly assessing what our students desire, what's healthy, et cetera. And that, I know a lot of people just want certainty, as do I. I would love to tell you as students, that's my goal, is to give you as much comfort so that you can have the foundation you need to study. And if you feel nervous, then it's hard to study. So I love to give students as much comfort as possible, but all I can do is be honest and say that's where we are today. And if the situation continues to evolve, or students tell us, that they've changed their mind otherwise, then we'll have to evolve as well. But that's where we are right today.
Thank you, Lua. The next question is, international students might have issues having insurance coverage, considering we are voluntarily going to a country with a great number of cases. What do you suggest them to do?
An F1 student is not required actually by the federal government to have insurance. However, this would be a really good idea if you are coming into the United States at this time. Please try to get insurance coverage. You're allowed to go to any of the, any insurance company that you choose to. You can make that decision with your parents, and we suggest that you take a look at the insurance levels that are laid out as recommended by Stetson, and that you try to find a company and a program that will meet those minimum requirements, just so that you don't get slapped with ridiculously unrecoverable emergency room bills or something such as that, because healthcare is so expensive in the United States that just one trip to the emergency room can really hit you. Please make sure that you're getting some sort of coverage, and do shop around. You don't have to go with something that you've seen on my desk. You can look at anybody that is available and offering insurance to international students and use them. My recommendation is shop.
And thank you, Paula, for putting some information in the chat on health insurance information for the international students. The next question is, are all kitchens in residence halls closed for the semester? Since I had a meal plan exemption, I was planning to cook.
They're not closed for the semester. What you're going to see a lot more information on is you'll start hearing the university use the language about tiers. So tier 1 is the highest risk tier. When everybody's coming back to campus from all over the world, including faculty and staff, that's one of the highest risk times of infection, which is why we've made rules about trying to make sure that most student employment continues at a distance, trying to align the new orientation groups that are coming in to DeLand are going to be the same group as your first year seminar. So you don't have another group that you're interacting with. So during tier 1, which is the highest level of risk, community kitchens are one area that the Center for Disease Control has recommended are not open. After tier 1, which depends on how we do health-wise, hopefully we're hoping that shortly after Labor Day, early September, just a few weeks into the term, we could move into tier 2. Tier 2 allows us to do more around kitchens being opened, etc. So in the meantime, if you are a person who has a meal exemption or you're used to using that kitchen for yourself, you might want to buy a couple meal plans or plan on getting some food to go or things that you could cook in your microwave. I know it's not ideal, but it is one of the higher risk areas is a shared kitchen with that many people. So at this point during tier 1, those kitchens, those shared kitchens, not in the apartments, but the shared kitchen in the larger residence halls would not be accessible, yes.
Thank you. We don't have any other questions that have been sent in since this last one. Oh, just kidding. What are the plans for us if the campus decides to close and we cannot go home?
So that happened this semester as well. When we switched to online, there were some international students who either could not go home or chose not to go home because they were concerned about getting back. So in all of those cases, we house students. We still are housing students, some who are domestic, some who are international, both on College of Law and in DeLand. So as long as you are in the situation where you need housing and meals, we will be here to provide them for you. There will not be a situation, and I know some other schools did this and it made a lot of people nervous. There is not a situation where Stetson would kick everyone out of housing or close down completely. That would not be responsible given who our student population is. International students, yes, but also students who live at a long distance. There were some states that were closed, so some students couldn't get home to New York without quarantining, or some students didn't want to go to New Orleans because at the time that was a hot spot. And also some of our students, this is their only home. They either don't have a relationship with their parents or they aged out of kind of our foster care system in the United States. So for our student population, we make the commitment that we will not close housing or meal plans while you're in need of that.
That's wonderful. Oh, Roxanne?
Yeah, I have a question for Lua. Actually, I've been asked by a student, what would happen if we all come back and then we have a hurricane and we cannot gather in a shelter?
Yeah,
Help us with that, because that seems to be on people's minds as well.
Mine too. So we have been working with Volusia and the local shelters to see if there's a possibility of securing a shelter that would just be for Stetson students. It depends on the level of the hurricane. For lower level hurricanes, we do still try to stay open in the residence halls. For higher level hurricanes, as you know, over the past few falls, if you've been with us, we do have to evacuate campus. Our goal would be to try to get as many people housed in other homes as possible. I know that's not ideal either, given the COVID situation. At this point, with a hurricane, we would be choosing the best of the worst options. Like, is it, I mean, really, you know, but right now we are working with the county to try to make a very secure plan for what would have to happen if we would have to evacuate campus. So that is a concern of mine as well.
Well, let's hope for no hurricanes. I mean, I think we hope for that anyways, right? The next question is, I know, please, fingers crossed. Do you know if the travel ban on the EU, as well as other countries, will be likely lifted or altered at all before the semester starts?
We do not know, but we don't have any indication that that's going to happen. So I'm not looking for that.
Yeah, we don't know, but it doesn't seem likely.
Okay. Sorry, there was a follow-up question about the hurricane. We would try to get everyone housed in a situation other than a shelter if possible, but if our people are required to go to a shelter, we always send our staff with them.
Roxanne, do you want to comment anything else about hurricanes and some of the information that we also provide for the international students and supplies?
We make an effort to help prepare our students, especially our new students who, you know, come from all different climates of the world. Some of them, you know, don't even have a lake, let alone a hurricane they'd need to worry about. So we try to prepare you for the idea that this is something that happens in Florida. It will be a brief part of the orientation for some of our newest students. What we always do whenever we know that there is one coming, the advantage with a hurricane is you usually know it's coming and you've got a couple of days to plan ahead, is we make every effort we can to connect our students with another Stetson family member of some sort, either another student or a faculty member, so that you have someone with whom you could go home and be safe. Many of our students choose to just fly out when we have a hurricane and go to wherever they do feel safe, whether that's back in their own country or not. That may not be as available as it has been in the past. So we need to get a little bit more creative about how we will help to house everybody and keep them safe during those events. Stetson's going to work with us. So I know that if we reach a place where we don't have access to shelter or whatever, there is not any one person who would be put out on the street during a hurricane. You will have a place to be. And you will be with somebody from Stetson who will help to monitor your well-being and make sure that you're getting your needs met.
And I just want to reassure folks, pretty much the same thing will happen at the College of Law. Dr. Hudson and I have spoken about what generally our hurricane preparedness plans are and how they impact international students and how we can be sure that folks are taken care of. So the same assurance is here. Nobody will be left to fend for themselves, and the law school will be helping you if we have this possibility happening.
We have one more question. I know we have talked about this before, but I think maybe they may not have been here at the first time when we first addressed it. Will Stetson provide a refund for housing in case Stetson will go online?
So if you go online, we did change the refund process. So it's in the housing agreement, and I apologize, I don't have that right in front of me, but we made it much more generous and kind of spread out. So there's a certain amount of the semester where you go to like 25% and then 50 and then 75%. So it's very close to the amount of time that, depending on if we did have to close, and it is different than last year. So that is in the housing agreement. And then meals is always refund based on that day moving forward.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. I feel like every time I'm about ready to say we're done, we get another question, which is good though. I'm glad that we have all these questions and we have the time for all of them to come in. Is it possible that there is a visa exception for F1 so we can request it as an emergency visa?
I think that varies almost consulate by consulate. We've had one student who was able to get a visa. It was considered an emergency case at the law school. But for the most part, student visas have not been viewed as emergencies in the consulates that I'm hearing of. Roxanne, I don't know if your experience in DeLand has been different.
Yeah, we have exactly the same count, right? So I've got one student who's successfully been able to petition for an emergency, and no one else has successfully succeeded in that.
The next question is, will there be some type of financial aid for students that will have to go through expensive travel arrangements in order to get back to the US? We understand flights right now are really expensive and limited.
So I'm in the process of getting the link that I'll put into the chat. It is for DeLand specifically, but there is a COVID relief fund. And I know there was some concern from international students that they weren't eligible for that fund, which is not true. There are certain parts of it that are funded by the federal government that international students aren't eligible for. However, we've had plenty of private donations. Student government on both campuses has given to the COVID relief fund. So there's plenty of money that, well, I won't say there's plenty. There is access to money there for students who are international students or potentially undocumented in the United States who need relief. So please, they are reviewing those as they come in. They have prioritized international students. We've been able to get a grant for some additional funds that went into that pool specifically for international students. So I will go ahead and put that in just 1 second. I'll go to the web and then I'll put the link in the chat.
The grant that we've received to support international expenses is exhausted, but there is indeed still some COVID funding. It's Hatter's COVID Cares or whatever. So she's absolutely right. There is some money there. I'm also looking for another grant that potentially would be able to support some of those travel expenses. But please, if you are one of those students who needs to spend 2 weeks in one country and then fly to the United States and then come in and you have to get a hotel and all of that in the meantime, please save your receipts, because anything that we are able to do in the way of a reimbursement is going to require that you submit those receipts. So hang on to them. I, at this point, cannot promise that we are going to have money. Hear that again. I cannot promise that we will have money, but I can promise if you don't have receipts, you will not get any. So keep your receipts.
Thank you, Roxanne. And thank you, Lua. The article and the link is posted in the chat. So if you need any more information on the Hatter's Care Fund, please check out the link below. I don't see any more questions coming in, so we are going to cap it at that. And I want to thank our panelists for joining us today and for all of this information. I know it's been extremely helpful, and I know there's a lot of probably questions still out there that you might have, but we are here for you. Lua and Roxanne, as well as many of the members from the College of Law, included their email addresses in the chat. So please take a look at that and jot those down before we close out the session today. But thank you all so much for joining us and all these wonderful questions. We look forward to seeing you on campus and welcoming you back. So thank you all very much, and thank you again to the panelists, and have a great day.